All right, today we're going to cover XML modes, raw, auto, and path. They all, little overview. We're going to work a lot of these into each of the code samples using the for XML clause. We're going to cover the raw, auto, and the path. And within each of those, we're going to cover the root, row, and elements options, along with adding your column values as attributes or as kind of nameless fields or values inside of nodes. All right, so the for XML is required when you want to use raw, auto, explicit, or path. And what it does, it transforms your result set into a single or multiple XML nodes. And you can see here in the top, we have a select star from inventory table, and here's your classic result set, which you can have as a grid, export to a file or view it as text. Then when you do the XML raw, or for XML raw, you can see here that it's just a single result, and when you click on it, it opens up another tab and it displays the XML right there. Okay, so XML raw will turn each row in your result set into a single XML element. They're not nested in any way, so it's not well-formed results. You can see in the top here, it's a select star from XML raw, and it creates the node name as row. Pretty creative there. So for each one of them, did the inventory ID of 1, 2, 1, 2. And we'll go over these in the code samples. Just kind of giving you a quick overview. You can replace that row with an alias if you want. So you can see here there's a row alias for each one of the results. And to make it well formed, you tag on a root option after the row or after your alias if you alias it. So you can say root, in which case it applies a node named root, which you can also alias. And then it will be well formed. All right. And then, where's it going? All right, so if you don't want your column values as attributes, let's see here. Slideshow's getting away from me. You say elements, and what it does is the column name will be the node name, and the value will be inside of the node. All right, so on to the demo. For this demo, we're just going to use our query training database. Create inventory table and a categories table. The categories, we only have 4 categories in there. And the ID is an int. And then for each of the inventory records, they will be referencing a category ID at the front there. So drop and create that. Okay, so select star from inventory. We get our result set. When we say for XML raw, we get our one result. And when we click on that, we can see here it's the same results as before, same amount of rows, except now the columns are attributes and their value is inside the attribute. The inventory ID, category ID, item SKU, description, etc., etc. And note that that is not considered well-formed XML because it's not all wrapped within one node. This is still not well-formed, but we created an alias raw alias on each one of them. And then when we add on that root option, telling it, hey, wrap the result set in a root node. So now this is considered well formed. You can collapse it, expand it. We still have each row, each result row as its own XML node, aliased by raw alias. And here again, we're going to alias each row with raw alias, and we're going to alias the root right there. So it's starting to look more like XML we're used to seeing. And then in this last one, explain with the back. If you don't add on elements, it defaults to each column result or column row value as attribute values. If you want it to have the value as an element, you just add on elements after the root. We can see here that this is even more so like XML we're used to seeing.
You have to do all the elements, or like, for instance, if like only the description you really maybe want to add an element of that raw alias, you still keep all the other ones there.
So the question was, can you pick and choose which columns you want to be elements versus attributes? And yes, you can, and we'll cover that coming up. So since this is well formed, you can collapse sections, collapse the whole thing. All right, so now we'll get to XML auto. So XML auto is similar to raw, but instead of row as the default node tag, it uses the table name or alias. And with raw, row, root, and elements can be used as well. So in this first little screen capture here, it's just a select star from inventory for XML auto, no aliasing involved. And we can see that each node is called inventory. And the columns are attributes again. On the second example, I did for XML raw root, and it added on this is the same as our previous example, the root and row. So the default node name when you use XML raw is row, and the default root node is root when using raw. So, and then the second query down here, I have two tables, aliased I and C inventory and categories. I say for XML auto with a root, and it defaulted the name to root. And then each of the nodes, since there's one category for multiple items, it aliased the category section. The first category is sleeping bags. So the node name for that level is C, because that was the alias for categories. And then each of the items associated with that category, those nodes are named I, which is the alias for the inventory table. Okay, we demo that. So query is select star from inventory for XML auto, and it automatically chooses the table name. So table name was inventory. It's a single table query. For XML auto with a root, and we alias the root as root alias. You can see that now it's well formed with an aliased root. Could be inventory items, it could be anything we wanted. And then within that is each inventory row with its own node. Okay, so now we're going to show the difference between raw and auto. And so here's our results from the query that we're going to be using for XML with. It is this returns a sleeping bag and the associated items in each of the, it returns the category title and each of the items within that category. So for XML raw, which is the previous one we covered, we have our root element and our each row element associated with it. So now when we say auto root for XML auto, you'll see that it created the root element, and then it created each. It's kind of like it grouped the items by each category. So each item has a node level of I, node name of I, and each category has a node name of C. And since it's well formed, we can collapse them.
It's kind of nice you get auto group bys on that stuff.
Yeah, it's nice. It groups automatically by itself, and it works left to right.
That's a case where a decent alias name would be useful too, right?
Yeah.
Whereas you and I are in this case, right?
So if you use XML auto, you want to be cautious on what you alias your tables or CTEs, because that will decide what your XML nodes are named. All right, so let's do it. Let's run it again with XML raw. So you can see that with the elements, it put the column value inside of the tag there. It's well formed. Okay, for XML path is like raw, where it has its default names. Once you specify them, it doesn't take the table names, and it will by default put your column values as elements, element values, not as attributes in each of the XML. So in this top query here, it's just a same query we were using before, but for XML path, and it created the row tags and the column title nodes, and then the column values as elements inside of each of those nodes. Whereas raw, the one below it, just created all attributes within the single row tag for each result row. And like before, you can alias each of the levels, like the node levels or the row or the root, I mean. And Gabe, your question was, can you force certain columns to be attributes instead? And yes, you can. When you alias a column with the @ symbol, @ character, it will put that as an attribute on whatever row that it's currently running through. So in this case, it's the select category title as @ category title, so be an attribute, and then select the item SKU. So in the results, we have our path aliased as category. So in the results, the category node has a category title attribute and an item SKU node in it, with the item SKU as an element, since we used path. I'm guessing if you use XML raw or XML auto, it would put it as an attribute as well.
So what's the difference between path versus raw with element?
The question was, what's the difference between path versus raw with element? And it would
Seems the same,
it would be
right?
the same, yeah. So it's kind of, you pick which one that's gonna, whatever's gonna make your, knock out most of your structure automatically of what you want to build. When you add the slash in your column alias, it will automatically nest it. So in this case, we use the category title as at category title, so be an attribute at the current node level, and then item SKU as item slash at item SKU, so be an attribute at the item level, and then the next column is description as item slash description, and the results show that we have our category with our category attribute. We have the next node level is item, and we want the item SKU as an attribute at that level. And then item description, we want it in the description node. So I created a description node and added the element value there.
What happens if the description contains XML?
So what happened? So the question was, what happens if the description contains XML? I think it will. It won't even, the query errors out. You need to escape it, or yeah, it won't escape stuff automatically. And then, well, what if you want to just put a value nested in, say, some other node?
Why wouldn't that work with description in the element with a nested XML?
If you had like a closed description tag or something like that, I mean, it's like XML injection.
Well, just a bit XML, yeah, but if you had a well-formed piece in that column, it would probably just stick it there, right?
I don't know if
there's-
we would try to replace it with ampersand greater than
Oh,
IT.
yeah.
Well, I mean, what if you needed to send XML and you had a data value inside of it that was actually XML itself that you needed to send somewhere else for them to process? And so it is, you don't want to like incorporate it into your XML. It's just kind of like, hey, here's a chunk of data that happens to be XML, so you can escape it or do something else. Okay, so using an asterisk.
You mean if the column was XML type?
Yeah.
So I go back to thinking it would just stick it in there, right, as plain old XML in the description.
Yeah, we have to try it.
Yeah.
But if the description contained, less than or greater than sign, or any
Oh yeah.
or a double quote, or it would error out.
Oh yeah, you're right. Like if it was a text column or something or not text,
Yeah.
bar charts, something like that, and
Yeah.
had a slash with the brackets or something.
Yeah, you
totally
can
whack it.
definitely run into errors when you're building out XML. So if you use an asterisk in your column alias, it will put that value in your XML without kind of adding a title to it. So in the first example here, it's we select category as category title as an attribute, item SKU as an attribute, and description just as a value. So we can see in the results, we have our category title attribute, item SKU attribute, and description value as an element in the description node. But in the second query, we change the description one to say items /star, and that built it out as in the item node, there's the item SKU attribute, but then the value for it is the description. There's no description node inside of the item node. So that's a way to kind of force.
Only one field reference that kind of text, the text on it there, or could you?
I haven't tried it out, so. Right. On to XML path. So we'll be using the same queries before, the category titles and each of the item SKUs in the category titles. We'll add for XML path on there, and we get the each row element, each row node, and then each of the result columns have a node titled as such, and the item SKU node, and the value with each one is in the node. We can alias the path level or the root level, categories, and then titled. Each of the nodes inside are the column names, like we've seen before. So in this, and we'll start adding more detail to it. So we'll say select category title as an attribute category title, and then the item SKUs. You can see here that for each categories, which we aliased as the path, we have the category title attribute, and inside that, the item SKU. Zoom in. The item SKU node and its value as an element.
So that might be more useful, like with the second one, category, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
looks better.
yeah. It didn't come across in my poll. Okay, let's run that again. There we go.
Yeah.
We can see categories is the root and category is at the individual. All right, so for custom nesting, category title as the attribute again, the item SKU in an item node, and the description in an item node. So here again, we have categories as the root node, and then multiple category nodes, the attribute, the title, and then our custom node item. And we selected the item SKU as an attribute and the description as its own node. And then we get into those nameless fields where we are pushing a column value into another node as an element value. See, category is as an attribute. The SKU, item SKU is an attribute on our new custom node, and the description value as an element on our custom node here. All right. Do we have any questions?